The last episode of Invincible's third season starts us off immediately where the previous one ended, with Mark and the mysterious unnamed Viltrumite beginning their fight. He doesn't introduce himself and immediately starts fighting with Mark, and after just a single punch, there's already collateral damage. As we've seen before, when Viltrumites fight to the death, it's the innocents that suffer. In Season 1's finale, we saw the carnage caused by Omni-Man and Mark's face-off, which we were reminded of in Episode 6 of the season by Powerplex. In Season 2, Episode 4, we saw the massacre of Thraxans caused by the Viltrumite soldiers. And in Episode 4 of this season, we see the Viltrumites practically destroy an entire space prison during a breakout, and presumably everybody else on board as well, sans a few. The only time we didn't see the slaughter of innocents during a Viltrumite battle is when Mark faces off against Anissa in Season 2, Episode 7, but that was not a fight to the death, as Anissa states that killing Mark wasn't her duty. But an important thing about this fight is that she warns Mark that another will come, and if he doesn't submit to Viltrumite rule, the rest of the planet will pay the price. Anissa wiped the floor with Mark during their first meeting, and in Season 3, Episode 1, we saw him training to become better for this coming threat. So Season 3 Mark is the strongest version of him we've seen so far, but we know that he's in no headspace to fight. The world around him is in shambles in the aftermath of the Invincible War. His friend Rex died, his lover Eve hospitalized, and the catalyst for all of this in Angstrom Levy slipped right through his fingers. All of this had just happened and he has no time to process anything. And during the fight, it's revealed that this Viltrumite is stronger than anything the GDA has seen at this point, and the timing of his arrival just makes things go from bad to worse. Mark's head just isn't in the game, and we can see this when he's trying to fight, and he even tries to get the other Viltrumite to stop, which is foolish, as this Viltrumite has stated that he wants to fight. He wants a challenge. He wants Mark to resist. But Mark just can't. And it's Oliver who can. He flies in to save the day. And this is Oliver's moment of catharsis. Debbie gives him the go signal to help Mark and fight side by side with his older brother, something that he's been talking about for the entire season. But as big of a moment as this is for the kid, it's abundantly clear that Oliver just isn't ready for the same level of threats that Mark is prepared to face. And the Viltrumite recognizes this and starts targeting him immediately. And with his brother in peril, Mark gets a little more reason to fight. We get a scene where Mark is holding down the other Viltrumite and pummeling him with a barrage of punches, which is similar to what happened when Mark fought Angstrom Levy in the previous season finale. But in that fight, Mark wasn't holding back, which caused him to seemingly kill Angstrom, which weighed heavily on him afterward. Perhaps subconsciously, Mark is holding back, and he's afraid of cutting loose against this Viltrumite despite what we've seen him capable of doing. Remember that in Season 2, Episode 4, he was nearly killed by Thula, another Viltrumite. His father had told him that he needs to stop holding back and to fight like a Viltrumite, but Mark stood by his morals, that he doesn't kill. And that ended up with Nolan getting captured, hundreds if not thousands of dead Thraxans, and a threat sent to Earth by the Viltrum Empire. The Viltrumite shakes off the punches and seemingly continues to have the upper hand in the fight. The scene then shifts to the GDA, where it's revealed that Cecil is having D.A. Sinclair convert the fallen Marks into Reanimen, turning them into Reanimarks and more weapons for Cecil's arsenal. Cecil wants them done ASAP so they can help Mark, who's getting thrashed against the Viltrumite, but Sinclair's having difficulty because even in death, the Mark's bodies are stronger than anything he's worked with before. This calls to mind a scene in Season 1, Episode 5, calling attention to how powerful Viltrumite cells truly are. We then cut to Adam Eve waking up from the hospital. Her parents are by her side and ecstatic to see her awake, but the television shows Mark getting beaten down on screen, and she immediately jumps to join in the fight, much to her parents' dismay. She accidentally lets slip that Mark is invincible, but to Eve, that doesn't matter right now. She also has a brand new prosthetic leg, which is the direct result of her fight with Omnimark. And back in the fight, we see that the Viltrumite isn't done beating around Mark and his brother. After literally brushing Mark aside, the Viltrumite then sends Oliver flying with a single punch. And this is quickly followed by one of the hardest scenes in the show to watch. And what makes this scene even more gruesome is the fact that we know how powerful this guy is. And the only reason Oliver lives is because this Viltrumite chooses to savor the moment and draw it out, allowing Mark to fly in and save his little brother. Mark and the other Viltrumite continue the fight elsewhere while Cecil attends to Oliver. And then we get a callback to the Season 1 finale, the infamous train scene. But except this time, the Viltrumite takes Mark by the neck and pushes him through a beachfront city and the many civilians in the way. The speed at which they fly creates a wind so violent that it tears bystanders limb from limb, once again illustrating how dangerous it is to be around Viltrumites when they fight to the death. But Mark has had enough, and he finally lands a hit with some oomph to it. But then he's shocked to see that Adam Eve has entered the fray. Like with Oliver, Mark tries to get her to leave, but with Mark out of commission, Eve takes the fight into her own hands. But remember, Eve isn't the best head-on fighter, and in an extended fight, she will run out of energy. And we saw this in the previous season where she backed up some of the Guardians against the Sequids. And for a bit, it looks like she has the upper hand. She manipulates the density of the air, stopping the Viltrumite in his tracks, and uses a variety of new constructs like axes and Morningstar heads. But she's just outmatched and has a hole punched right through her abdomen, seemingly killing her. The Viltrumite then taunts Mark as he cries over her body, thanking him as he reveals that he's finally able to cut loose and he takes pleasure in the bloodshed and carnage. And then Mark drops the coldest line of the series. And like an animal backed into a corner, he bares his teeth and seemingly stops holding back. Mark and the Viltrumite clash fists once more, but this time the punch is so violent that it shatters both his arm and his opponent's prosthetic. Mark is fighting with much more ferocity now, but the Viltrumite grapples him and exclaims, "Getting mad doesn't make you stronger." But Mark has been subconsciously holding back this whole fight. Only after Eve's apparent death does Mark start fighting with reckless abandon. Because remember what he told Eve while she was dying in his arms. "I can't do this without you. I can't live without you." At this moment, Mark has just lost the person he loves most. His everything. Which means he has nothing left to lose. He doesn't care if he dies anymore. All he wants to do is destroy this threat, even if it costs his own life in the process. Like an animal, he bites down on the Viltrumite's shoulder, and the two clash in the air. And then the scene cuts to Eve, who awakens her dormant power. Now, if you didn't see the special episode, this scene may feel like it came out of nowhere and is just a random deus ex machina, but it's explained that Eve was created by the government, and she was given a subconscious mental block that prohibits her from altering the living tissue of sentient beings, like animals and people. And we've seen that this mental block of hers is overridden by intense trauma. The first time we see her unlock it is when she witnesses the deaths of her father figure and birth mother. And I can't speak from experience, but I believe having a hole punched right through your stomach and nearly dying is traumatic enough to unlock your mental block. Unfortunately, this distracts Mark and gets him pinned. And this is when the Viltrumite starts giving a monologue, during which he reveals that he has no given name, only a purpose: Conquest. His role in the Viltrum Empire is to go around and conquer worlds for his people. And there's a significant reason why he hasn't given his name until this point. In all kinds of literature, we're shown that names carry a lot of power. A name isn't just what you call a person, as they also bear a lot of cultural significance. They can indicate social status, familial ties, and intended purpose. The Game of Thrones series is a prime example in popular media where names are given significance. In that show, we see children born generations later named after their forefathers. We see how powerful certain names are, like Lannister, Stark, and Targaryen. We also see how different cultures have different naming conventions. And we see that bastard children aren't immediately worthy of their family names. In fact, some bastards are so upset by this reality that they're even willing to start a war over it. A name connects you, tethers you to other people. In Season 2, Episode 6, we saw Debbie give a name to Nolan's son, Oliver, naming him after her father. It's a short scene, but it took about 2 episodes before the baby got an actual name, showing how much weight such a decision can hold. The name itself also bears significance because it connects Oliver to family, specifically Debbie's and Mark's. Having a name means being connected to someone, and it's why Powerplex from earlier in the season put so much emphasis on remembering the names of his fallen sister and niece. And when you know someone's name, they are no longer a mystery, becoming known to you. And in this scene, we finally learn Conquest's name, and this is also his most vulnerable state, as he shares that he's lonely, and that the other Viltrumites fear him. Despite his incredible combat prowess, he has no friends, and this tells us so much about Conquest. He has a desire for connection, but his people fear him. The other Viltrumites, as militaristic as they are, do not wish to know him. Thus, he has no name nor friendly connection to others, which is why he wishes to face strong foes, because what he cannot find among his people, he seeks in the opponents he destroys. He wants to feel connected. He doesn't have friends, but having enemies is also a form of earthly connection. And we've seen this dynamic in other media, and it's probably best illustrated by Batman and Joker. Joker has all the means to defeat Batman in a lot of ways, like uncovering his secret identity or outright killing him, but he just doesn't. And that's because a Joker without Batman would be incredibly lonely and have no purpose. Having a nemesis gives him a connection that he can't get anywhere else. And this is best illustrated in continuities where Joker exists without a Batman for whatever reason. He's bored, empty, and a shell of his former self. Even if he has Harley Quinn and the Joker gang to keep him company, he still wants that antagonistic connection because it's a meaningful one. Conquest dumps all of this trauma on Mark because he finally feels connected to someone and deems him worthy enough to know his story. And it's why Conquest doesn't look triumphant as he's about to take Mark's life. He's heartbroken that he has to kill Mark because he's finally found somebody on his level. He finally found that connection he so deeply craves, but he has to end his life and go back to easily taking over worlds for his people's empire. Until Adam Eve catches him off guard and blasts him with a laser. Like I said, this is the state where he was most vulnerable. Mark follows up with a punch, knocking Conquest to the ground, but the older Viltrumite still manages to break Invincible's hand. And then Mark starts using his head, savagely slamming it into Conquest's skull. Mark then asks if Conquest is still having fun, to which he responds that he takes the good with the bad. Conquest may have been defeated, but he's still enjoying the connection he feels. With his face bashed in, he lies there seemingly dead. And there's a real fun parallel here if you're a fan of the TV show based on Kirkman's other work, The Walking Dead. And if you are, you may recognize Conquest's voice actor, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. He portrayed Negan on The Walking Dead TV show, whereas Stephen Yeun, Mark's voice actor, played Glenn. And spoiler warning for The Walking Dead, the last time these two shared a scene together in that show, it was Morgan's character bashing in Yoon's character's skull, so there's a bit of an Easter egg here for loyal Kirkman fans. Afterward, Mark can only crawl towards Eve, and with the little remaining strength he has left, declares his love for her, which she then reciprocates. Mark then passes out, and so does Eve, who questions her nudity. In literature, nudity, specifically female nudity, can symbolize a lot of things. Vulnerability, fertility, purity, and innocence are some examples. But in this scene, like a baby fresh from the womb, Eve is naked to symbolize her rebirth. She nearly died after having her guts spilled and her face bashed in, but now she's alive once more, as pure as the day she was born. No metal leg, no busted lip, and no guts on the floor. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the showrunners drew her in this specific position. Cecil and the rest of the heroes then arrive and save the couple. The scene then cuts to Mark in the hospital where Eve reveals how she lived, and the two share a tender moment. Then we see D.A. Sinclair again, discussing with Cecil the difficulties behind creating the Rihanna marks, and it looks like he's got a new girlfriend. But Cecil puts his foot down, telling Sinclair to crunch even harder, as he suspects with the death of Conquest, more Viltrumites will arrive. Cutting back to the hospital, Debbie arrives with Paul, but unlike Eve's parents, they allow her to stay. And then Debbie starts apologizing. She realized that she had unknowingly put a lot of expectations on Mark, and didn't understand the level of responsibility that having Viltrumite powers would come with. Mark reassures her that she's not at fault at all, and that she did everything right, and the two share a hug. Cecil then interrupts this moment to thank Mark, but immediately Mark asks to see Conquest's body. Remember that in the last finale where Mark bashed someone's skull in and seemingly killed them, that person lived, which was the catalyst for the entire Invincible war. So this time, Mark wants to confirm his kill, but upon seeing the body, Mark isn't relieved. He's seemingly angrier than he was, and this could be for a number of reasons. He had to swallow his pride and ask for help from Cecil, whom he said he would never work for again. He let Oliver suffer at the hands of Conquest and saw Eve nearly die. Not to mention all the people that died because he was unable to defeat Conquest quickly. While seeing the body confirms his kill, he's also reminded of his failures. Then we get to Rexplode's funeral, where Rudy is giving a eulogy through one of his drones. Rex is among the heroes that lost their life in the Invincible War, using his own skeleton to kill Goggles' Mark, but there are others that died too. The hunk had his guts ripped out, presumably by gay Mark. British Knight had his skull bashed in. We can assume this woman, Shrapnel, was also killed during the fight, and perhaps the biggest loss is the tragic death of Business Baby. Rudy talks about how Rex believed in saving lives, how Rex was honest about his shortcomings and fears, and chooses to remember all the good things about Rex. And it's fitting, as Rex and Rudy have fought side by side longer than any other two characters on the show. They were together on the Teen Team, the Guardians of the Globe, and the Post-Guardians team, so it's fitting for Rudy to give the longest eulogy. We also see Ray in attendance, but she's alone by a tree, away from everybody else, and in tears after the death of her lover. Earlier in the season, the two developed a romantic relationship, and she was closer to Rex than anyone we've ever seen on screen. She opened up to him about her past the same way he did to her. But Ray also wanted to leave the superhero life. But during the Invincible War, there was a call to arms that had pretty much every superhero available in the thick of things. But Ray wasn't there. While she had retired at that point, she still had powers, and we never saw her fight any of the Marks or assist in the cleanup. Despite being the one who loved him most, during his funeral, she stands alone, away and hidden from the crowd, because she may feel guilt. Earlier in the episode, we see Debbie remorseful of how she acted towards Mark before he got her powers, subconsciously pressuring him to become a hero, even if it makes no sense to us for her to want to apologize. This shows that it's natural to feel guilt for things outside of our control and feel that there's more that we could have done, even if it doesn't make sense when we really think about it. But this also brings to mind a scene from the previous episode, where Eve's mother talks to Mark about how a childhood friend of Eve had died while she was minding her own business, while Eve, who was on the front lines against the Mark variants, got to live. To some, it may sound insensitive, but it illustrates that bad things can happen to anyone, whether you're a normal person minding your own business at home or a superhero saving the day, and that if you have power, you have the unspoken duty to make the most out of them. But at the end of the day, Ray didn't. And perhaps internally, she feels unworthy to stand with the people who did. And to honor his fallen ally and longtime friend, Rudy says he will change his name to Rex. This was foreshadowed in the previous finale when Mark meets the future heroes, and future Eve quips at what seemed to be the version of Rex that we already knew, except that he was in Rudy's robot suit. One of the overarching themes of the season is symbols. Mark points out how dangerous it would be for Oliver to use a costume and name inspired by Omni-Man. Powerplex has it out for Invincible because, in his eyes, he represents superheroes being above the law. Angstrom purposefully uses alternate versions of Mark to wreak havoc on our reality so that people will associate Invincible with death and destruction rather than hope. Conquest has no name, which is a symbol of a person's connection to the world around them. And now Rudy takes Rex's name for himself, claiming to want to honor him through this. But to take the name of a fallen friend, especially after stealing his DNA and taking his form, feels like a theft of identity. Rudy claims that he does it to honor his friend, but by taking his name and body, Rudy has now become Rex in everything but personality. By taking the form and name of Rex Sloan, everything he does reflects back on Rex's legacy. The last thing that people remember about Rex is that he was a guardian of the globe and died protecting his friends. It's as heroic of a send-off as you can get. But now everything Rudy does will reflect back on Rex. If he commits a grave mistake or worse, this will affect Rex's memory. The last words of Rudy's eulogy were, "He was everything I ever wanted and still want to be." And now, for better or for worse, Rudy gets to be Rex. In a sense, this is incredibly rude and disrespectful for Rudy to make such a big announcement at the funeral of his friend, kind of hijacking the spotlight. But this is in character for him. Remember that he spent his life trapped in a test tube, and that he took Rex's DNA and cloned him without his consent. He barely knows what it means to be human, so Amanda lets it slide and looks at the intention behind Rudy's, or Rex's, decision, and tells him that she loves him, and calling him Rex. Eve then attempts to give her eulogy, but she's overwhelmed with emotion before she can finish. Remember that despite Rex's cheating on her, he was still her good friend. In the previous season, we saw Rex visit Eve at her home, pointing out the flimsy lock on her bedroom window as he asks her to help the Guardians out with a Mars mission. Eve also helps Rex when he's hospitalized, giving him home decorating magazines. And the last time we see Rex and Eve together on screen, he's playfully teasing Eve about her new relationship with Mark. Yes, they're former lovers, but they still clearly have a deep bond. Mark then goes to comfort her, and she points out how Rex had changed throughout the series. But while Eve is grieving the loss of her friend, Mark is seemingly happy. While Rex cheated on Eve multiple times apparently, Mark relishes in the fact that Eve is alive, right in front of him. The scene shifts to Mark's bedroom. Eve undresses herself and Mark using her powers, and the two make love. The camera then pans down to Mark's suit, which is seemingly melting. Perhaps there's something up with Eve's powers ever since she was reborn. Then the scene shifts to the end of season montage, which sets up future plot points. Underground, we see the Sequids have taken multiple civilians as hosts. In season 2, we saw just how threatening these guys were with just a single host, and now they have multiple backups within the hive mind. We see Battle Beast still alive, just frozen in deep space, and Angstrom getting a new arm after Invincible ripped his old one off. And perhaps the biggest plot point is the fact that Conquest is still alive, and that Cecil intends to hold him hostage and use him to gain valuable information on the Viltrum Empire. But we've seen what Conquest is capable of doing, and how much it took Mark just to subdue him. So will all of these restraints be enough to hold this mad Viltrumites down if and when he wakes? In the very next scene, Mark and Oliver discuss how death is the only way to truly stop a villain from causing more harm. As throughout the series, we see a lot of criminals die, and as you can expect, they only stop becoming a recurring threat once they're squashed out and killed. The Lizard League has apparently been a problem for years, being a threat ever since Black Samson had hair and during his first stint with the Guardians. But it's only after they're killed by Rex and Ray do they truly stop becoming a threat, and the ones that live seemingly continue to wreak havoc. Kilcannon, Doc Seismic, and Angstrom Levy. But killing villains is a dangerous path for a superhero to go down. We've seen how superpowered individuals taking the role of judge, jury, executioner is a slippery slope to authoritarian rule in other superhero media. And we also know how useful villains in this universe can be if they're rehabilitated. D.A. Sinclair was introduced as an evil genius, but it turns out he just has a passion for creating cyborgs and also happens to be a psychopath with little regard for human life. We saw how powerful his Reanimen were against Viltrumites, being able to overwhelm Mark and Omni-Man at separate points in the story, and even killing the Flaxen Mark variant. We also saw how useful Darkwing 2 was when the heroes were captured by Doc Seismic, and how he sacrificed himself against No Goggles Mark to banish him to the Shadow Realm. Powerplex was able to kill another Mark variant, and he was even seen helping to clean up the mess. He's capable of heroic acts, he just really hates Mark. And of course, there's Titan. He's a crime boss and lets evil happen and provides for his family off of dirty money, but under his watch, his neighborhood has seemingly become clean. Kids are able to walk in the streets, people are employed, and he's just the lesser evil all around. And going even further back, the Maulers were also capable of good. They're just selfish. They were willing to help Rudy get his new body in Season 1, and in Season 2, they were also willing to help Angstrom build his perfect reality. If any of these characters had died after their first on-screen appearance, a lot of good in the world would have never happened. But we also know that there are villains who are simply too dangerous and beyond the point of redemption, like Angstrom and Conquest. So the moral conundrum is it right to kill as the hero? And in the final scene of the season, we see a familiar face, Damien Darkblood, as he's conversing with another fiendish character about how he's able to summon a powerful surface dweller, which will allow this other fiend to reclaim his throne. And that Darkblood has the means to summon whoever this is, presumably in hell. But we'll have to see how this plays out in a future episode. For now, I want to thank you for making it to the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the video and on the episode down below in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe for more analysis videos like this one. Be sure to check out my other Invincible content as well, and I'll see you in the next one.